right, thank you everyone. As Jim said, we're going to talk about Europe and what's going on over there right now. The US and Canada have become very large influential markets, but when we look forward, Europe is a region that holds a lot of potential. And so our goal in this panel is to give you an idea of what's going on there, where the opportunities and challenges are, and also look at whether there are possibilities to partner between Africa and the European Union. So I'd like each of you, just in a minute or less, can you tell the audience briefly how your expertise matches up to this topic?
Sure. So hi, Stephen Murphy. My background is in media, data and tech. I got into cannabis early 2016, really with seeing how normal cannabis was in cities such as Barcelona, and wondering why we didn't have the same level of normality of cannabis in the rest of Europe. And then obviously digging a little deeper, saw that there was very little understanding as to what was happening within the European cannabis space. So I set up Prohibition Partners really to help give audiences, be it investors, be it regulators, a proper understanding of what was happening within Europe and showcase the European opportunity and try and advance the European landscape.
Great, thanks Stephen.
Hi, my name is Yona. I'm a CEO of a company called Alvit Pharma. We're building today quite a large facility in the EU in Malta, about 140,000 square feet facility. I guess after researching a little bit, we also recognize the size of the market, of the European market, comparing it to the more mature market in Canada and in America. We're talking about, I guess in Canada, 35 million people, in the EU about 700 million people. So the opportunity is there. Just, quite vested into this opportunity right now.
Great, and then just quickly, my background with Marijuana Business Daily, we're based in the United States and we do market research. We provide news and analysis on the global cannabis industry and also host business events. So I think between the three of us, we have a very good handle on what's going on in Europe and can kind of paint this picture for you. So let's start at the high level view. Whoever wants to take this first. Give us, encapsulate where Europe is at right now in general with legalization in the markets. It's overall developing like the US, Canada, and Africa and other regions in the sense that it's a patchwork of different laws and regulations.
Yeah, I think the comparison to the US is correct in how fragmented the European market is evolving and how each country, like each state, is developing its own framework that is suitable to that jurisdiction. So the framework in Germany is a little bit different to the framework in Italy. The framework in Italy is a bit different to the framework in Denmark and so on. Now, as for international companies, that obviously creates a major headache. But what it does from an EU level is it gives them a proper understanding of the realities of implementing policy on the ground, and also a couple of examples from which to take best practice from. But what we are seeing is each country take a base primarily from either Israel or Canada, and then develop their policy from there.
I would add to this maybe 2 points. The first one, this not like in America on the federal level, there's no federal level. So if there was a federal level in America that makes it illegal and challenging to operate under, in the EU, it's not illegal on the federal level. There's no federal level. That's the first thing. The second thing is you do see I think in Europe that Germany's kind of taking the lead. Yes, they're taking stuff from Israel and from Canada. They're taking the lead. You see something very, very interesting happening there where most countries putting up standards. We want EU GMP on everything. We would like to have that industry. We'd like to open the industry, but not necessarily we like to open the doors for growing in the country, for cultivation. So it's kind of like inviting others in, but telling them there's a very high barrier to step into the play.
So in Europe, legalization and what it is very difficult to define. Every country defines it differently, and what is marijuana, what is hemp, and what is legalization, and then you've got CBD, so it can get very tricky and confusing. But in general, how many of the European Union countries have legalized by your definitions?
Well, over half the world's legal countries that are legal are European.
Tricky question, because again, hemp, CBD, cannabis, not very clear. Some of them allowing it and then pulling a little bit back. Maybe to make it more interesting, what we were looking when we were seeing that exact situation, that it's not very clear and changing all the time. We were looking for a country that can speak in the same language of the rest of the countries. Meaning, if you know the CBD at unique levels of THC, we're allowed to give it to you that level of THC. If you need more, we're allowed to give it to you. And I guess in Europe, we see right now, in terms of receipt or need of cannabis, you see Germany obviously lead, but in terms of production, I think you see Portugal and Malta, or actually Malta and Portugal kind of taking the lead on possibility of producing into Europe, from Europe into Europe.
Yeah.
There has been a push for legalization across Europe, and legalization for medical access, but there is a huge gap between the realities of legalization and actual patient access and patient numbers. If you try and look at, there's 19 markets in Europe that are technically legal from a medical perspective, but in some of those markets, such as Ireland, there's less than 10 patients. The UK went legal last year in November, and to date we've around 150 patients. What's the point in going legal if you can't actually serve the benefit and the need of the patient? So there's been a little bit of political pressure to appease the momentum of legalization, but very little has been done to build the infrastructure and the framework to provide that access to patients.
Yeah, and I think one of the takeaways here is that what you've seen in Europe is, again, a patchwork of different laws and regulations and what terminology they're using and what qualifies. In some countries, you can only export. In some, they have domestic cultivation. In others, they are only importing. So it gets very tricky. But for those in Africa that are looking at this market, it will likely develop very similar. Every country is kind of paving its own way, and they're picking and choosing what they like from other countries, and they're trying things out. So there's not going to be a unified way to handle this here, and there isn't going to be in Europe, and there isn't in the US among states, and there isn't in Canada among provinces, and there isn't going to be around the world for a very, very long time. So as you look at this industry, know that each country here is going to handle it differently, and you have to get up to speed, and they're going to evolve at different speeds as well. So when we look at Europe, you had mentioned Malta, Portugal. What are some of the more promising markets right now from a business perspective?
Well, I suppose it comes down to where the economic opportunities are from a sales perspective. It's the big countries. It's Italy, it's Germany, the UK, where there is a sizable population and a sizable addressable market. If you're looking from an investment and operations perspective of areas to conduct your business and base your business out of, and if you are into, say, cultivation, then the likes of Northern Macedonia, Denmark, despite the fact that it's an expensive place, their framework to support cannabis cultivation is actually quite unique. And then Portugal, which is very advanced and has an ideal climate for both, for greenhouse and outdoor cultivation.
I think it's a little bit more you can be very more direct with it. You need to sit with B-Farm. Germany is where it starts entering into Europe right now. They're the most advanced in receiving. And you ask them which country you willing to receive from. If they say, so their basic flow was, we want right now EU GMP from the EU and possibly Canada. Okay, there's only 5 suppliers right now into Germany, which are 4 Canadian and Contrast. Bedrocan, sorry. So that's 5 suppliers right now. So after sitting with them, we just kind of went to every country in the EU, and I can explain why maybe, let's say, a license in Macedonia would not have that value because they're not part of the EU yet and they're not letting stuff from out of the EU into the EU, or why they're blacklisting certain country in the EU, so maybe Greece have less value than, let's say, Portugal. For us, after like screening really every country, we realize it's a game of regulation of the law, of changing law. So if the country were able to apply a law that will be accepted by everyone else, you're in the game. Malta was the one last year that actually passed the most simple law that was accepted immediately by Germany. Now it's a small country, and everybody's saying, how, maybe you can cultivate there because it's not big enough, but, really, if you're looking at numbers, our footprint over there can generate 10, 15 tons. I don't think all of Europe is not accepting that amount yet. Obviously it will in the future, and there's room for more like that, but that's, I think that's the right way of operation there. You see if the law in the country actually fit to supply to the other countries, and if you are, you're in the game.
But I think that's what you'll find in certain African countries who have been at the forefront of innovation. Malta is a case in point. A small island nation with no major domestic industry, and we're keen to attract foreign business. So that foreign business was gaming, was crypto, and over the last 2-3 years, they've been very quick to set out a framework and also provide a lot of the resources to attract international business within the cannabis space. It's definitely a point of differentiation, and we see some government delegates here today. We see government delegates more and more at cannabis events who are looking at the long-term opportunities and, I suppose, the investment opportunities and foreign direct investment opportunities it has for their countries, and a point to differentiate it.
Yeah, and just to piggyback on that, so the size of a country and the size of the potential market doesn't always mean that that's a good market. So again, in Africa, or if you're looking in Europe, you really have to look at the structure of the law. As Stephen said, the UK legalized and they've got 150 patients or whatever it is. So some are more business friendly than others, and some are more patient friendly than others. Some have more red tape, some are embracing this. And what you find is the governments and the countries that embrace this and are trying to turn it into an economic engine, they're trying to make it into their own, are the ones that usually have the more opportunities, whether that's Colombia or Canada, which legalize medical and recreational federally, or Denmark.
Like the UK it's a great market to be present in. There's more cannabis companies than cannabis patients in the UK. It is a centre of finance, it's a centre of innovation, it's a centre of brand and business. But the realities of actually doing business in the UK, they're behind the rest of Europe. Now the addressable market, it makes it interesting, but you have to properly understand the current framework within each market in Europe. There is a little bit of work being done within the EU to try and solve issues such around novel foods and the treatment of CBD and different cannabinoids. There's also different frameworks around having a different grade of cannabis for different types of audience and different types of audience sets. One thing that is good about actually operating in the EU is you do have to operate at the highest standards, and we would see those are the standards that are going to be set from a global perspective. So preparing your business to operate at the highest standards is a very good long-term move for ensuring, one, that you have the best product available, but two, that you lead the way when you compare yourself to other operators within the space.
Great. Yona, go ahead.
I have a feeling that in let's say 3 years from now, we're going to sit in England and we're going to laugh at the numbers. Meaning, the same way when I'm looking at Europe, I'm looking at everything is happening there already happened 5 years ago in Canada or in Israel. And we kind of know the game. We know what's going to happen. It's going to continue growing. And there was 150 patients in Israel. I remember patient number 4 in Israel. okay? And now they're up to 52,000 or patient number or whatever. Europe is going to grow relatively, including England, very big. Not sure England is going to be part of the EU, but if they are, it's going to continue growing. One thing that comes into mind when we're sitting here in Africa, and I hear that in many places, people discussing always the cost of production in countries give them advantages. And I want to go into like exactly what those costs are. So I guess the most common, the most common in the medical cannabis right now is 10-gram bag. And I mean, our public company in Israel produce or advertise that the cost is roughly, let's say, 50 cents, per gram. That's $5 in the bag. I know in Malta it's cost me about half that, maybe $2.50 in the bag. I don't think I need to save any further than that, meaning the packaging costs me more if I choose 2 colors than 1 color in that. So I don't really need to bring from Africa or from Colombia or from other places for production into Europe. I can produce in Europe at a fair price, comparable to save all the headache of actual imports. But right now, it's different. Right now, I'm going to be ready in, let's say, a couple of months right now for my growing in the EU. I'm not enough. They need another 100 or 50 or whatever like me growing there. Right now, there is an opportunity. Right now, if someone have merchandise available grown under GACP or or process of GMP, Europe will receive it. But on the big picture, Europe is a big player. Europe can produce for itself.
So what will that mean for Africa in general? You don't think that there will be a exporting opportunity for them into Europe in the future?
Unfortunately, I think it's meant for Africa what it meant for Africa always. Okay, Europe, I'm sorry if I'm not politically correct, Europe will take advantage of Africa if right now we can produce, but in the future, Europe will produce for Europe. And the same way, right now Canada producing for Canada and America producing for America. And even though we would like the market to be a global market, we would like, try to find, this is cheaper to produce here. I remember myself a few years back saying, how much coffee do you produce in Canada? None. So same way cannabis is not going to produce there. The weather doesn't fit there. And you know what? I was wrong. Okay, they're producing a lot of cannabis in Canada and keep on growing, producing cannabis in Canada. And same thing happening in America. You know what? They're going to find a way to make it cheaper. Maybe they will outdoor one season in Canada you can do, and suddenly they're cheap production as well. Okay, the countries like to protect their industry, and also 7 regulation. Company likes the 7 regulations.
Well, we only have 2 minutes left. That went pretty quick. So want to stay on time, and I think just to finish that thought and wrap up the panel, where do you think the opportunities are for any cross-border collaboration, partnerships, business investing between Africa and the European Union?
I think it's patient access or market access. So rather than transporting of products, which is exceptionally tricky, it's the transporting of IP, be it IP within tech, IP within facilities, IP within knowledge. So clinics, education, data tracking, these are the things that can be shared, and where Africa has a huge heritage from sustainability and sustainable engineering. There is a lot Europe can learn from that, and Europe has an awful lot from a pharma innovation perspective and R&D that Africa can learn. And these are the skill sets that can be brought back and forth to provide better patient access overall.
You got 35 seconds.
There's a need in Africa for cannabis as well. Cancer, pain, epilepsy, any one of those diseases that cannabis helping does not discriminate. It's here in Africa as well. And we learned the hard way in Israel, because we're very good in making things complicated in Israel. So we learned that, if you can't export the actual goods, you can export exactly what you said, IP, the know-how, whatever. So Africa and not necessarily where the EU needs to transfer merchandise from one to another, but you can definitely help each other, help people. This is what this industry is about, helping people.
Great. Thank you both. Please give everyone a round of applause. And if you have questions, I'm sure they'll...